WHO Talk Show. We have with us, as promised, to continue this series that we're doing right now that our good friends over at Charlottesville Tomorrow has been putting on, Erin O'Hare, reporter extraordinaire. You like how that rhymes, don't you, Erin?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
It was good.
Yeah, she said I like that.
Because I know you're a songwriter and everything, so you can feel free to use that. Just make sure I get my publishing.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. Of course.
But Erin is doing this great report right now about Fifeville and the redevelopment that's going on in the ever-changing Charlottesville. I mean, it's really a whole series encapsulating changing Charlottesville, and that's the title of it, Changing Charlottesville. But we had them on first, and we were talking with some of the developers and the neighborhood association when it comes to the conversations and the big changes that are on the horizon for Fifeville. But today, we were following up with some of the residents that Erin have been in touch with. So the Fifeville residents, they got a say in the private developers' plans and what this agreement looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Erin right about now so she can kind of bring us and our listeners up to speed as to where we are. And you can introduce who you brought along with you.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on. I always love coming on and sharing the work that we're doing with a wider audience. So I really appreciate that. So as Charles mentioned, I've been working on a few different stories centered around Fifeville. One is part of our Changing Charlottesville series, which is taking U.S. Census data and looking at that to give numbers to a lot of the changes that people in the neighborhoods across town are seeing. And then I've talked to folks in those neighborhoods about their experience, what they've seen. And I mean, it all just lines up so much with the census numbers. And in Fifeville in particular, we're seeing some huge changes. If you're looking at things like household income, it's grown, like the household incomes have grown exponentially. And one of the measures that really stands out is that in 2013, so 10 years ago, the majority, like if you look at different income brackets, more people were in the lowest income bracket in Fifeville, the $20,000 or less household income each year, than any other income bracket. But by 2021, the most recent year that we had reliable data for, it had completely flipped. So there were more residents in Fifeville in the highest income bracket, the $100,000 or more, than any other. So what that says isn't just that everyone in Fifeville is suddenly making more money. That would be great. Of course. But that's not what's happening. When you see a change like that, it means that people who with lower incomes are moving out and people with higher incomes are moving in. So we're talking about displacement. And so we're seeing a lot of that in various neighborhoods throughout the city, including Fifeville. Right. And a lot of the residents I've talked to can speak directly to that. So I brought Miss Dorenda Johnson, a lifelong Fifeville resident, with me today. She's one of... Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Well, good afternoon, guys. Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And Erin, let me ask you to follow up on something you've been saying. So have you compared this data to other locales? Because unfortunately, I think this is like all too familiar to different urban areas, like when it comes to renewal. That's my question to you. And then I actually have a kickoff question for Dorenda, but I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah, like different locales throughout the U.S.
Yeah, throughout the U.S. I mean, this is because I want our listeners to kind of put things in perspective. Like this is a systematic thing. It's not necessarily a Charlottesville thing.
Yeah, it's happening all over the country, in particularly in cities, but it's really happening everywhere. I don't have the comparison data in the stories, but personal experiences are just as important as data, right? And I know that my family that lives in the Boston area up in Massachusetts, my grandparents who've lived there for many, many, many years in Somerville, Mass, they've owned their home since 1955. they're really struggling with their property taxes because the area has changed so much, and it's become such a desirable place to live that we frequently worry that, that they will have to move eventually because it's too expensive. So it's happening everywhere. It's not just a Charlottesville thing. And different localities are trying different things to prevent it or ease it. And Charlottesville is doing some of that as well, like anti-displacement measures. Cities looking at that as they're looking at the new zoning code. But
yeah, that's a loaded statement.
It is
loaded. Like that was loaded with just so many tidbits. And Dorenda, like I want to kind of bring you into the conversation because because I want your opinion on something. All right, because I heard Erin mention things like being more of an attractive place to live, or more favorable. I think you said more favorable place to live. You talk about development because development normally brings business, it brings traction, it brings residents. So Ms. Dorenda, as a lifelong resident, can't that be a good thing? Like I want your take on it. Like when you look at people saying, "Hey, we're gonna build this and build that," it almost sounds like we're talking about sort of two different worlds, if you will, two different initiatives. One is we can we can improve the neighborhood, but at the same time, it seems to be like a fiscal government responsibility to make sure people can still afford it. Like, would you agree with that? That is different things, or do you see it as all bad and just all pushing people out?
There we go.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It went out for a minute. I apologize for that. I don't know what happened, but it went out.
Oh no, you good. My bottom line question was, when you look at redevelopment, like, can it be good, or when it comes to if your local government can find ways to control costs, so people who want to live there and remain there can stay, or when you look at redevelopment, is it just looked at as gentrification?
To me, a great deal of it is gentrification. That's to me. Okay. Yeah. And in some ways, what they are doing, who is it benefiting really? Who is it attracting and making it appealing for who? Who is it being appealed for? Because it's not being appealed. It's not appealing to anyone who's making $30,000 a year. And they're the ones that I know. Okay. I myself, I have lived over here in Fifeville 54 years. Okay. My mom and dad bought their home over here when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
That home that my dad bought 54 years ago was $118,000.
Right.
No, it wasn't even that much. I'm sorry, $18,000. It was $18,000.
Okay.
So all of this renewal that they're doing, can y'all hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So all of this renewal that's taking place, who is it helping? Who is it really and truly helping? I'm not that pleased with a lot of it. And I'm not saying I wanted the neighborhoods over here to remain all Black and separate and all of that, but I want it to be equal for everyone. And that's not happening. These houses over here, just like on 10th Street, it was back in the day, you never would imagine that there would be $400,000 and $500,000 homes. So now who do you think are going to be able to afford those? It's not going to be anybody making $30,000 to $40,000 a year. So yeah, we do have an issue. We have a problem. And this zoning thing, it bothers me because all of these new things that are being built, all of these new apartment buildings being built, going straight up in the air. I want to buy a house, but I can't afford a $400,000 or $500,000 house. I don't want to live in an apartment. Not everybody want to live in an apartment. I'm not pleased with what's going to be built down at Estes. I'm not happy with that. A building going straight up in the air, a cement building going straight up in the air. I'm not happy with that. Along Main Street, that apartment building up there, $4,000 a month. Who's in it? Who's in that $4,000 a month apartment building? Take a poll. Take a guess. It sure isn't very many people that look like me. So what is the purpose? What's the real purpose?
I got you.
I have a question.
That's what I asked. So who and what and why?
Yeah.
Who, what, and why? You know, my brothers don't live here anymore. I had 4 brothers. I have 3. And they all do extremely well. They live out of town. And when they come in town, you know what they ask me?
What's that?
Where the black people? Where the black people at? Where everybody at? Where everybody that we knew? Where's everybody at now? Why is it looking like that?
Yeah.
And it's looking like that because we got $4,000 a month apartment buildings on Main Street. We got $500,000 houses in our neighborhoods.
Right. I'm sitting here taking all that in. Wow, like that's a lot to process, but I know Razor has something.
Yeah. Erin, I want to ask you a question. In your studies, have you found that the city has a overarching plan? Because it seems like these developers know where to strike and what to do. So, but I never see anybody really write about what the city has as a plan. I'm not attacking the city manager or anything like that, but it just seems like, okay, if we know that the businesses are going out of the mall and we know that we're restaurants every day, how is this place looked upon as favorable to move in when there's nothing here? Unless the goal is to dismantle what is here and build back what they actually want to be here.
Yeah. So the city is looking at making a citywide anti-displacement plan. And they're looking at small area plans in particular in neighborhoods that have faced a lot of gentrification pressures, like Fifeville, which has the Cherry Avenue small area plan. And then like 10th and Page, Rose Hill, parts of Venable. Like the city is looking toward that. So once this whatever happens with the zoning code happens with the zoning code, that's the next step is anti-displacement.
Isn't that the problem?
plans.
I don't mean to cut you off, but isn't that the problem? If I can get you to focus on the little nuggets around, you don't look at the big picture. You can't see the forest for the trees. So these neighborhoods that you're talking about are not particularly their neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods that they have their sights on. But if we're talking
the
about
developers,
the city, but if we're talking about the city as a whole, why aren't we talking about everybody's plot of land?
In the displacement plan?
No, not the displacement plan. That's what I'm saying. When we label it things like that, we get people to focus on the small nugget instead of the whole thing. So why don't we talk about Charles? What's one of the more affluent places in here in Charlottesville?
Oh, Lewis Mountain.
Yes, you're saying in city limits.
In city limits, like
Lewis Mountain's the wealthiest neighborhood. Yeah.
Okay, and then let's take the top 3 wealthiest neighborhoods. They got land.
Yeah.
You know, and if their land can be cultivated into building more things, why are we not talking about their land? But if we can,
and we never do.
But if we can get people to focus on these little small things, we'll never ever affect anything that affects them.
Exactly.
They're telling us what to think about. So why aren't we writing, not coming at you or anything, but why aren't we writing about that?
So we have plans to look at those neighborhoods and in the Changing Charlottesville series. And I mean, I can't speak to why city plans are the way they are since I don't work for the city. And they can
folks on.
Yeah.
The
questions.
And I think like one of the things that's happening in the conversation about the zoning code is that a lot of the folks from those neighborhoods, you hear a lot from Lewis Mountain, you hear a lot from Barracks Rugby, you hear a lot from the wealthier folks in Venable and Greenbrier. You hear a lot from those folks about the zoning code, and it's been pointed out by the city that those are places in the city that could have more density. Those people, there is a little more land out there than in 10th and Page, than in Rose Hill, than in Fifeville. So those are places where more could be built, but the zoning code, 1, hasn't allowed for it. So they're trying to change that. But 2, you know, I I mean, I can't speak for developers, but you're right that it's very, very residential. It's completely different from other parts of the neighborhood. And I think those are really important questions to ask of folks. Like, why aren't we looking more at those places as areas for future development? Why is it always 10th and Page, Fifeville, et cetera? What I've heard is that those are the places that have the amenities. They're walkable to UVA. They're walkable to downtown. That's why people want to live there. And that's why they've been targeted by developers as places that people would want to live.
Mr.
And, I think all of that within walking distance and all of that, yeah, whatever. Bottom line to me is that they've always taken, and they've taken from those poorest neighborhoods, and they continue to do so because they can do it and get away with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bottom line, they've always taken. They take and they take and they take all the time.
Yeah.
And they continue to do so. And they've gotten away with it for hundreds of years. And that zoning was set up the way that it was set up to do just that.
Exactly.
Period. There's no more sugarcoating, no more this hemming and hawing. The bottom line is that they've always taken from people that look like me. And that is it. When will this stop?
Right.
That's it.
So, Ms. Dorenda,
we got to stop it.
Yeah, and that's exactly why when I started the first question that I kicked off with you was to point out that we're dealing with the system. We're dealing with the system.
Exactly.
Like we're talking a lot about specific neighborhoods within Charlottesville, and like Razor said, there are always reasons that kind of get dressed up and sugarcoated to kind of take your focus off of what's the injustices that's really being done. And so that takes us back to the system. How do we change that? And of course, having some of the city reps and whatnot and face-to-face addressing it. And as I think was already stated as well, there seems to be some steps that could be going in that right direction. But yes, when you are dealing with a system that, like you said, Mr. Dorenda, like this is the history of it, right? Like this is what gets done. And I wanted to point out that that's not just a Charlottesville thing. So we're dealing with a bigger issue than just 10th and Page and just Fifeville or whatnot. Like there's mentality. Like that's the reason why we need more people that look like you to be on neighborhood associations. Like that's the reason why people like you got to show up at the zoning meetings and things of that sort.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and also I was going to say it's also why why cities and developers and whoever else, like the folks in charge, need to make it possible for folks like Ms. Dorenda to attend these meetings and to have the opportunity to speak up. You can't have a meeting in the middle of a work day. You can't only have one meeting when there are people who work two jobs, like making that possible is an important part of making this equitable. So you were going to say,
Charles.
Yes.
Do you remember back in the day when we used to have the thing called the Green Book that told people where to go, where it was safe, right?
I've heard about
Can you imagine if we were to put out a list of demands and not call it like when Ice Cube was calling like the black goals to become president, anything like that, but we actually had something that people can say, look, if people don't fit these criteria, this is what we're looking for. You're not getting voted in. We come to a collective agreement about these are the things that we want. If you're not putting this in, and we pass that amongst our communities that want change, can you imagine how powerful that would be?
Yes, indeed.
So I'd agree, very powerful.
Yes, I agree.
Whether or not Ms. Dorenda thinks that it is possible at this day and time in Charlottesville and amongst our Black community, the members of our Black community that I'm sure you're or associated with or familiar with their work.
I'm sorry, it went out and came back in on that very first part of your question.
Sure. So I'm curious as to whether or not you think that the list of demands that Razor just mentioned are possible. Is that even feasible amongst the Black community here in Charlottesville? for us to
Well,
come.
what we need to do, what we need to do first, what we need to do first as a community is come together as a community.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
got to be together. We
think
got, and it would be possible if we could get beyond some of the BS that we hold against each other.
Mm.
We're
say
so
that every
busy
Sunday, Mr.
pulling,
Rand.
we're so busy pulling each other down
Mm-hmm.
instead of supporting one another. We got to be together. We are strong. We were born strong. We were born to take on the world. But we also are so guilty of pulling each other down and not supporting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to come together as a community. Come out, speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Get on these boards, get on these commissions, get involved, get these young people, our young Black people, get them involved. They need to be involved. They need to know, they need the knowledge. We're doing ourselves a disservice because we are not together as a community. We got all of these people making decisions for ourselves and for our communities that don't look like us. We need people like us that look like us to help to make some of these decisions. We got folks in this town, Black people in this town, and I'm gonna say it, and I may upset a lot of people, and I'm sorry.
Sorry.
But we got Black people in this town that make a whole lot of money. And you turn your back on your community. What are you doing to invest back into it? Okay, so things like this, it will be possible. It could be possible if we make it a mission and say, this is what we are going to do. Enough of white people making all of the decisions that they've always made for hundreds and hundreds of years. Enough.
Mr. Render.
We got a lot of smart people with money. Those white people got money and power, right? What about us? What about us?
I got a question for you.
Yeah,
Mr.
I got something for that, but go ahead.
Thank you. Don't make it too long.
No, Mr. Render, your Charles, is my volume up? Let me ask you a question, please. The friends that you have that are in your age group, when you see everything that's going on, if I may ask you this question, what is your age group doing to make sure that you pass on the information that the younger ones that are out there doing something can actually have a path to take? Like, you have seen more things than we've seen. So is it fair to ask that the older generation come together and let the younger generation know what we need to do so that we don't have to start from ground zero?
That's a yes. And I have a lot of friends in my age group that are extremely interested and they do their best to get involved in some things. And they want to empower our young Black people. I have two young sons. One is 30 and one is 28. I talk to them all the time. They're just not, it's so hard to get that generation to show the interest. That's where my hands get a little tied and I get confused. It's that they don't, they talk about it, and so many of them feel that it's not going to matter. It doesn't make a difference.
Yes.
And, that's that too. It's so many layers, y'all. It's so many layers.
And then we choose to just survive.
My sons themselves, like I said, I'm always talking about the history of Fifeville, what it was like when I was a little girl, all of the different things. And I tell them, I said, y'all can make a difference. Y'all can make a difference. All of those friends that you have, you sit around and you talk about this and that. How about talking about doing something that can make a major difference in your lives? And, and again, so many of them, Some of them say that they're very interested, and I know of some that are really doing some really good things. So don't take that
Absolutely.
away.
Absolutely.
But I would like to see more.
Yeah. Now I know Erin is going to chime in, but I want to make sure that that the scope of this conversation is definitely kept in mind, because like if we compartmentalize this, like there's a lot that's been said, and like you said, Mr. Dorenda, it is, it's like it can be overcomplicated when the solution should be simple. But the fact that this conversation is going so many directions shows that it's just as complicated as it is simple, right? Because we're talking about a historic issue of white supremacy. Let's call it what it is, right?
Yeah.
And then that fed into a lot of self-hatred for Black people, right?
Yeah.
Like amongst ourselves, and so now we're in a generation to where a lot of our kids think that we're post-racial. They really believe that we're post-racial, and it's just about getting to the money, right? So then so that's kind of where we are, because when you talk about money, Mr. Dorenda, like you said, before I kick it to Erin, like since I brought this up to Steve there, let me ask you a question, Mr. Dorenda. If there was a majority of Black people, and I always want to ask everybody these questions that are in such neighborhoods, if it was a majority of Black people with money moving in, would your feelings be the same?
I don't
You can
think
answer
so.
honestly, please answer. You can answer. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I feel the same.
I don't think so. And and I'm not even saying that they all got to move back. I'm just saying so many of them forgot where they came from. You know what I'm saying? As far as giving back, you ain't got to actually move back.
That's confusing.
But give back. I know, but just give back and support it. Support your neighborhood. Support. That's what I'm saying as well. A lot of that happens too.
Yeah. So, and the reason I bring that up is because it's relatable to, when you see what's happening at the old Estes on Cherry and whatnot, it's relatable to the dairy market. Like me personally, I try my best not to patronize there for multiple reasons, but I'm not going to say that I never go and never will go again. I'm not going to sit here and lie about like that. But I am conscious of it, because of what's happening. Now I know there's another new Black in there. Can't think of the name of the one.
Chrissy Cakes.
Chrissy Cakes just moved in. Yep. So, but my point
Who moved in? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. What moved in there?
Chrissy Cakes.
It's a bakery, right?
Yeah. When you walk in, you go to the right side.
Yeah. So props to her. But the reason that I bring that up, everybody, is that I hear us talk a lot about the representation, about spaces no longer feel welcoming. You know what I mean? So my thing is, like, while we look at there are examples in the city, and Erin, if you could chime in on it, I would love to hear. But there's great examples of mixed income neighborhoods and mixed income housing and whatnot. But here's the key: we're living in a time of inflation. Like let's not forget that, right? And that's what makes me think where Black people with money could also be putting their businesses in these spaces. They could be living in these spaces, so it could be, again, quote unquote, and like a welcoming environment, and people feel like that it's safe spaces and whatnot. Like, so I just don't like when we get caught up on, if it's Black, that means that it has to only be low income. I feel it needs to be mixed use.
Right, exactly.
But we need to be involved. That's not elitist at all.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But isn't that the tag that got tied to any Black person that's trying to do better?
Exactly.
Aren't
Black people
doing
better sometimes are. You're right. You're right. That's how you looked at a lot of the times. But I'm just saying, like, the past is the past, and we got to fix so much internally. But right now, like, everything's inflated.
Yeah.
Like, everything's costing more. But that doesn't stop our people with the means, like Mr. Dorenda said, to care, to come back and give. And everybody could be out here voting. Everybody could have that list of demands that Razor, quoted, like that Ice Cube has had. We've had Western folks start, like our Black Party. But so if we stick to the script, the people are in control. The people in City Hall are people that we allow to be there.
Right.
I say all that just to say, like this is complex, but there's steps that we can take.
That's
exactly right.
As you mentioned earlier, Charles, we don't want to get away from the topic at hand, but I don't think that if we did have Black people moving into some of these neighborhoods, the natives of Charlottesville, those that are already there, are going to be terribly excited about that. I'm
That's a good point.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
and
that's
I
true.
always like
But
to
that's an
preface
internal
these type
problem,
of
though, ain't
yeah,
Yeah,
true. It
that's
speaks
true.
to what Mr. Dorenda just said a few minutes ago. But I always try to preface these type of comments by saying that I'm not from Charlottesville, but I think we'll deal with a whole nother set of challenges as far as like classism
Yeah.
and just things that continue to perpetuate the friction that we already feel amongst each other. The buildings will still be too high. If depending on the income level, isn't maybe another neighborhood is more suitable. This neighborhood is still reserved for whomever. Like I just feel like we'll bump into a whole lot more challenges, even if that were to happen. So again, we have to figure out how to come together, like Mr. Dorenda just said, and save ourselves.
Yeah. And Erin,
Okay.
you've been trying to
Oh,
chime in.
yeah, I just like on the topic of young people, I did talk to a number of young people in Fifeville for this story that we're talking about the 501 Cherry Ave development, and they couldn't join us today, and I'm really bummed that they couldn't, because that's the kind of representation we're talking about, right? That young folks, like, we want them more involved, and from my understanding and based on who I talked to, they were pretty involved in speaking up about the 501 Cherry development. I talked with a young woman, Nisha Allen, who's 25 years old, and she has a lot, she has a lot of space in the story. So I'd encourage folks to read that story on our website. It's called Fifeville Residents Got a Say in a Private Developer's Plans by Making an Unusual Agreement. And Nisha was one of the young people who spoke up. She's 25. She grew up in Fifeville with her grandmother, but she can't afford to live in the city anymore, never mind her own neighborhood. She just can't. And that's the case for so many young people. And for her, she would love to live in Fifeville again. She said that she loves that there's a very family-oriented aspect. It's where she feels comfortable. It's where she grew up. And so for her, she sees the 501 Cherry Ave project as maybe a place that she could afford on her income. So she's like, this could be my chance to move back into the neighborhood. And she's so brilliant. I really wish she could have joined us. And I spoke with a young man, Tron Jackson, who's 19, and he also has grown up in Fifeville, and he was talking about how his whole life, his parents have talked about affordable housing. They're like, it's so expensive. It's so expensive. And the fact that that's on a 19-year-old's mind,
Right,
to me, I think that doesn't say very good things about Charlottesville. But he also spoke in favor of the development because he, I think, also saw it as a place where young people in the neighborhood who are working jobs like his at Cane's Chicken, that they could afford to live there too. And where, I mean, again, so much is left to be determined with that development. But my sense was that young people were starting to speak up and were invited into the conversation, and that made them feel empowered to speak, which was.
Erin, I gotta. Maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. When you said the 19-year-old gentleman was looking at housing and where he was going to live, and that's not a good thing. Is that what you're saying? Because
no.
Counterparts, like, that's something that's taught, like knowing how to run a bank account, looking to buy a house at a young age. Like, it just, maybe I misunderstood you.
Yeah, sorry.
Very old.
No, that's not what I meant. I meant like the fact that as a kid, the idea that like being housing insecure, of having to worry about that when you're a child up through 19,
Okay.
As a 19-year-old, he's looking forward to that, right? But like, it's been on his mind as a kid. Like, you don't want to hear kids here, like, at, even younger than him, of course, being like, oh, my whole life, my parents have talked about, like, can we still afford to live here? Are we going to move? Like, it's just sad to hear kids worry about that. And he spoke about that in his childhood. At 19, yes, totally a conversation parents should be having with their kids, I guess. They did with me. But yeah, I think I didn't maybe explain it very well, but that his whole life, it's something he's been aware of, that Charlottesville's an expensive place to live, and might not be a place he could live, even though it's his home.
Yeah, like the upward mobility is something that I always like having in front of these conversations. But y'all absolutely right. Like at the core of it, we know it's a system. Like we know that has generated self-hate and internal hate with, amongst our own. And so the system holds us back, then we hold each other back. But so like Ms. Dorenda said, like now we are at a point to where generation after generation is faced with the same thing again. Like, how do we get over this PTSD? Like the post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Charles,
That's what
Mhm.
do you think that we're holding each other back, or we're just focusing on who we're accessible to? Because the ones that are really
Both.
making the decisions, most of the young people and most of the people that we're talking about don't have access to these people. Like, nothing's sadder than voting somebody into office that won't talk to you after they get into office.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so these are things that we have to collectively find who is going to be in leadership, so we can make these demands to go talk to somebody.
We have
And
to collectively demand, just like we said earlier, the
Yes.
meetings. We need to
Absolutely.
demand that the meetings are at a time where the majority of people can make it.
Yeah.
Things like
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
But ladies and gentlemen, we are talking with Erin O'Hare of Fifeville tomorrow, and Fifeville resident Miss Dorenda, aka Rennie. So I'm thinking, like, what's next? Like, I know, Erin, we have plans to ask these exact questions when we're talking about how is the city accountable, like how can they better serve the residents. And then, in fact of the matter is, when asked that face to face live on air, then you got to answer, is this really going to be a commonwealth, or am I on the side of the 6-figure plus folks, or I'm on the side of the lifelong residents, like that may some of which are low income, like those are the decisions that our government has to make. And again, like that's not going to be an easy change, because that's a worldwide system, right? It's a worldwide system against people of color. But Charlottesville always claims to be so liberal, being a progressive blue dot in the South. And all that stuff. Best place to live, best place for families, all that stuff Charlottesville claims. Like these chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And so like these things need to be dealt with.
So, Erin, where are we? You may have mentioned this earlier, but where are we specifically right now in the development of this project? They're approving designs. They're like at this very moment.
Yeah, so they're looking at site planning. So that includes like looking at like what's under the asphalt on the parking lot. We know that there's a stream that runs under there, like looking at the slopes of the hills, all that stuff. But there have been a few community meetings about the design. So the architect for the project has been talking with residents about how do you want the building to look? Like, we know it can be this many stories. I think they've brought it down from 6 to 5. Now it's at 4 with 2 in the back. So they're looking at, like what kind of materials do they want to see the building, like, is it, what do they want it to look like facing the street? What kinds of like plants are they looking at? Are there ways that they can, like make the back of the parking lot look a little bit better for the people who live right behind them?
What about the amenities that the community wants?
So my understanding of the project is that pretty early on, when Woodard Properties was putting this together, and the neighborhood association was like, hey, what are you going to have in there for the neighborhood? That's kind of how that agreement we talked about in the previous show came together. So the amenities in there will be the Music Resource Center, a twice as nice, and they're hoping for a grocery store. It's not locked in yet. At least it wasn't 2 weeks ago when I last talked with Woodard Properties. They're actually having kind of a hard time finding a grocery store to go in there, because they want it to be relevant to the neighborhood. That's something that's in the agreement, right? Like if it was something like
that was in the agreement,
it's in the agreement that it should be relative, relevant. I'm tired. That it should be relevant to the neighborhood, because that's one of the things that will happen that can spur gentrification and displacement, right? Is like a Whole Foods, for instance, would open in a neighborhood, and then all of a sudden you've got folks who are going to the Whole Foods all the time be like, oh, this is a cool neighborhood. I could live here. And they're, pushing out people who maybe live there and can't shop at Whole Foods or wouldn't. So the amenities in a lot of ways are they are very important to a neighborhood, as to who, I think it was James Fries from Neighborhood Development Services put this in I think it was a good way of explaining it. Like, there's a difference between being able to live in a neighborhood and being able to live in a neighborhood, and that the amenities in a neighborhood should be relevant to the people who live there, to make it a better place for them to live too. And that's people who already live there, not just people who could.
And what's the status of the laundromat that's still there?
Yeah, so that's-
Oh, in 10th and Page? I don't know.
There was talk of laundromat on Cherry too.
Oh, I know that there
Oh,
used to
really?
be one.
Yeah, there were actually 2 back in the day.
I did my laundry
Yeah, but
there for years when I
Right there
first
where
moved to
the
town.
right there where the ice cream shop is, that was a laundromat.
Right. Yes, my understanding was
Yeah.
that the residents were demanding that too, that a laundromat be
A laundromat.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything
know
more
what,
about that.
If I may ask a question, and I didn't get to ask this at one, haven't gone to a lot of those meetings, but because of the way I work. But how did Twice as Nice become? How did that even? I'm not really understanding that the tie with Twice. Because I don't mean no harm. I don't mean any harm whatsoever. But I hardly see anybody at Twice as Nice.
Talk. Speak your truth.
I don't hardly see nobody at no Twice as Nice. and I go past Twice as Nice every day. Every day. So, and I hardly ever see anybody there. So how did Twice as Nice become a factor in this? How did they get to be there and thinking that is such a need or desire to be in that neighborhood? Where did that come from? Anybody know?
I don't know the specifics. The only thing that I know about it is that they're going to lose their space over on Preston because of the 10th and Dairy expansion. And the dairy market, like the folks who own the 10th and Dairy, I forget, Stony Point Development, I think it's called. They own that land. They also own the land across the street where the Preston Plaza shop is. So Twice as Nice is going to be losing their space, and they were looking for another one. And they asked Woodard when they heard that they were looking at space for the MRC, that Twice as Nice asked, hey, would you have space for us? That's all I know. I don't know anything beyond that. I wasn't in those conversations, but that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, well, the residents definitely should have been surveyed on that one. But it sounds like some liberal overcorrecting, if you ask me, because you could say, well, we could put, like this boutique designer store here, but then people are gonna be like, too expensive, so let's overcorrect. Twice as Nice. You see what I'm saying? So yeah,
Right.
We're surveyed on this one.
Yeah.
Well, truth be told, I was thinking about, how having a Whole Foods there would impact the residents as well. I mean, food isn't
same
exactly
kind of thing.
cheap.
Boutique store, Whole Foods. You got to be in there. But Max, but that's kind of the problem at hand, right? It's like you're never gonna please everybody.
That's true.
But we got to find some sort of common ground.
But Charles, there's a difference.
Exactly. Everybody got to be met halfway.
Yeah.
And putting things in place that later let you play cards.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So they are, I don't want to use the word oppressors, but the people who have put us in situations that are not favorable to us.
Right. Yeah,
put
exactly.
Things in play. They put things on the shelf to pull back at a later date. So getting back to what you and Max were talking about a couple weeks ago, knowing who you're voting for and knowing what's going on around you is much more important before you're reactive to a situation. Because then it's hard to make change. Because so many things are put in place that you got to do this and you got to do that. When all you had to do was just find out who you were voting for and not vote for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And be sure to start voting.
Yeah. A lot of people haven't voted since Obama.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Be sure to
Dr.
vote.
Razor.
That's
Mhm.
no more this, I constantly hear. You
Vote in your
constantly, I
local
constantly hear.
elections.
Voted none. Yeah.
And like
Right.
as we hit the top of the hour, like I personally always like closing with accountability, right? Because there's still so much like that we could do. Of course, applying pressure to our public representatives, but just internally though, like that has still been a common thread of this discussion. If y'all have noticed that.
Mhm.
So it is still a matter of us, Razor,
Yeah.
from an economic standpoint,
Yeah.
of us, those of us who can,
Yeah.
being the ones who
Mhm.
benefit off of development and things like
Right.
that, and then creating space, creating welcoming spaces for Black folk to want to patronize, or
Right.
and developing future business leaders and things of that sort. You know what I mean? So, like and we need to take care of our neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's nobody
Right.
else's fault. If we can't get it together amongst ourselves, then how we expect we're gonna go in somebody else's house? And
But
get it
Charles, the
together?
difficult part
That's
about
exactly
that,
right.
the difficult part about that
Exactly.
is when we tell people what they need to do to come up to speed, it's called judgment.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So people play that card when you say,
There's always a card.
right. People play that card when you say, okay, look, this is what we're gonna do. Everybody like, yay, but this is what you need to do. Oh, you gonna judge my household? Hey, I'm here because of what happened back in 1846, and it ain't never changed, and don't nobody listen to me, and you don't care, and then it becomes that. So then, 2023 turns into 2024. That turns into 2025, and the hamster wheel that you were talking about, we're still in it.
Mhm.
Because when you call for accountability, the person who doesn't want to be accountable calls it judgment.
Mhm.
I
And
feel you.
our Black neighborhoods are fighting for so much more. As you all know, the city is drafting a new zoning ordinance, and you have a lot of members of the community who've expressed their opinion about the ordinance in terms of like high density and different things like that. But when it comes to Black neighborhoods, I'm hearing the other side's concerns, but it seems like the Black neighborhoods are fighting for so much more. It's the very integrity, right? The very integrity of their neighborhood, that they're constantly in this perpetual hamster wheel of defending, protecting, fighting for, holding on to, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if people see it and choose to ignore it, or it's just
I think it's a matter of
ignorance
value.
altogether, or
So we had. So I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, you're fine.
Like, so we have Sarah, who was on with us, who's the leader of the neighborhood association. We had Sunshine Mathon on, who's in charge of Piedmont Housing.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Dorenda, would you agree that we do have allies? Because in general, and Max, this question for you too, if you feel at liberty to answer, it's like, do we believe that we can have like allies like that aren't just Black people? Because public opinion seems to be like that. That at least the way that Sunshine and team goes about the business is a reputable way. Perfect? I'm sure it's not perfect. But if that's the case, reputable, then how do we just become part of the process so our people benefit off of it, instead of it being, if you're developing, that means you're pushing us out? Because I don't think it automatically equates gentrification. That's sort of a mental stigma that I think we need to get over a little bit.
Are you
It's
sure?
like it doesn't automatically.
That's a slippery slope, right?
It is, but it's not automatic. What I'm saying, Ray, is before we even get to the table, a lot of times we just be like, it's gentrification, so that means I got to go. But that may not mean you got to go. That means that we got to be a part of the process.
Well, okay. So
that's
the
also how we would
scenario that I'm thinking about is we have these developers who choose not to include these that drop their AMI of their units below a certain percentage, and so rather than having affordable units within their development, they'd much rather pay into the affordable housing bucket, where to the city, and then the city then distributes that to the Charlottesville Housing Authority or your PHAs or different things like that, who then take that money to further develop what they already have or create these other areas, other developments that are also low income. So is that, or is that not gentrification?
Yeah, we questioned Lord about that last year. Pay to play. That's all it is. It's pay to play. Oh, how much I gotta pay you so that you leave me alone? Oh, here, go ahead and take this.
And then the money just goes to other affordable housing companies, institutions within the city who either further develop what they already have or create other low income developments.
Yeah. So that's my point, though. So that's my point. If we don't intervene, then that's the end result. My point is that we can't just sit back and complain and predict the future if we're not intervening and trying to change the process. But you're absolutely right. That is going to be the outcome. If we're not taking care of our own communities and unified, standing up together against whoever has the who has the disproportionate laws that they're implementing and zoning that they're implementing.
Yeah, and that's a change in the proposed zoning ordinance, that having your affordable units is no longer an option. Like, that's a mandate, that there's no, like, you can have the choice to either pay into the fund or have your units. You have to have the affordable units. So that is one change in the zoning ordinance that, if it passes, I'm curious to see how that works.
Right.
Y'all got to do is
do you know whether or not I should know the answer to this, whether or not special use permits or special acceptance permits would help, would be kind of a loophole for developments to forego that?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You got to get rid of all those. If you really want to fix it, like you said, Max, they got to get rid of all the ways that I can, just pay to play. You can't have an option. Like, it's basic. Like, if you give me an option of being able to get out of something by just giving a couple dollars, I just charge it to the people. And then the city says, oh, well, they gave us this money that we can use to build more of the city, but then they disperse it to who they want to or who always gets the money. And we're still left looking around, trying to figure out, where we fit, what we do. And before you know it, now we got 2-3 generations who are in housing and all these other programs that never used it as a stepping stone, because really the rope was always too short.
The next part of the argument is, if we implement those type of changes, Erin, then developers will stop coming to Charlottesville.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's okay, because really what we need to be doing is trying to find ways to purchase land. That's why I'm glad what y'all have part of the show. Like, y'all did an excellent job with putting this show together. That's why I wanted to come back here today. And
Charlottesville only has 10 square miles of land.
Absolutely.
So that's it.
So they're going.
It's always a rebuttal, Razor.
But think about it. If they build up what we're known for, the beautiful mountains, the beautiful hills, the trees, and everything, you don't see them no more. So now they want to tell somebody, how do you want your building to look that you can't live in, that you can't live in? That makes no sense to me.
So that leads into that leads into another show of the county and the relationship between the city and the county, because knowing that the county benefits off of the Charlottesville name and population and everything else, that means that there has to be a better relationship that creates opportunity for both and for all.
Albemarle is a problem.
Yeah, because that's a toxic relationship, because you see that Charlottesville, you see that the city is landlocked. And there's many ways that you benefit off of it. And there's ways that you could help with the issues, not just benefit.
Yeah, Albemarle is a problem. Whether you talking about going east, west, whatever, like the way they have the land set, I'm not from here, so it's easy for me to see where the problems are. All you got to do is look at your school systems when games are played. We play certain places in Albemarle, Charlottesville does, and the racism jumps out through the children. Well, if the racism is jumping out in the children, then you know that it's at the home. And if it's at the home, then it's at the land. So they have, as long as we have not held them accountable to where they look, y'all don't get me started.
Accountability goes around. Sorry, Max. Accountability for everybody.
I hope Miss Brady said, I knew you was preaching. So
we are over though, but I think it would be now you good. I think it would be good to for Erin to let us know sort of where we are, next steps. And Ms. Dorenda, I want you, maybe you can kind of base it on Erin's response if you like, but I want you as the resident, right? As as the expert, like in this conversation, as the one most affected, I want you to say what you feel the next steps are, because you got the community listening right now, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, my first of all, I have a question, and I know Erin probably can't answer it, but if whoever goes to that next zoning, the zoning on all of this, my question was, I think I asked this once before. Okay, the zoning calls for these buildings to be high-rise type buildings. So whenever we think of affordable here in Charlottesville, they always think about a building going up in the air.
Project.
So and thank you very much, because that's all it is. It's a project, period. And they can sugarcoat that and call it mixing the income and making it affordable, but it's a project, upgraded project. So when can, and hopefully this new zoning will call for houses, affordable houses. Not a building going straight up in the air that's going to be a project. Houses.
But houses. Yeah.
Okay. So that is a question that I have, and I've had over and over and over again. Why does it always have to be an affordable project? Why? And no one can ever answer that question, but that is the first question that I have. We get rid of that and do something about that and make some homes for people. Okay. That's what I want. Because I want a house. I don't want an apartment. Okay. I may be older, but I want a house. I don't want an apartment. And I want it affordable that I can buy for Mr.
The last thing I wanted to say was, from what you just now said, one of the things that people need to go after and check on is when a place starts building out their jails and their prisons, and the housing market hasn't put something in to say, okay, we can still give you loans, we can still rent to you, even if we know you've been targeted to go to jail, but once you get that, then we can block you from getting housing over here. There's a plan in place. So that's what I mean by don't everybody get like focused on the little jewels. Look at the big
picture.
Don't forget don't forget not graduating.
And like I said earlier, there are layers and layers and layers.
Yes, indeed.
It's layers. So and it's just so much, and it's so many layers. And I've been out here doing different stuff in this community for a long, long time. And these layers, it's something else. These layers.
It's a system at play.
I'm telling you. And I may not see it in my lifetime. It get better. I may not. Because it's a hell of a fight right now.
Yeah.
And look how long we've been fighting.
Look how long
we've been fighting. I'm 64 years old.
Yeah.
And from what I know, and from what I've seen my entire life here, my parents fought and now I'm fighting still. Still.
Yeah. Well, God bless you. Thank you. And thank you. But
you're welcome.
But Ms. Rennie, is call to action. I still want to hear that from you. If you had to, leave here today with that, last word of next steps, call to action of your people that's listening, what would that be? I want to make sure that's loud and clear.
Come together.
Amen.
Come together. Okay. Let's come together. Let's stop sitting around talking about it. Let's stop sitting on the phone talking about it. Let's stop sitting around smoking Newport cigarettes and drinking Pepsis, because I was one that did it. And that's why I'm saying that. Okay. I love the good Pepsi and the Newport back in the day. I ain't saying.
Talk your talk.
And I talk. But let's stop talking. Let's stop talking. And let's get together. And let's do it. Okay.
Thank you.
Our children depend on it. At this point, grandchildren depend on it.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Grandchildren and great-grandchildren depend on it. We have to stop. And for those that made it, don't forget where you came from. Don't ever forget where you came from. Because where you are is because of where you did come from.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you. And Erin, if you want to help us close, just to let folks know where to follow up on the developments and the story, and what we got coming up next in regards to this.
Sure. So I will be following the 501 Cherry Ave project as it progresses. There hasn't been anything new since the story came out. Like 3 weeks ago now? Nope, 2, December 1st. And that is still up on our website at cvilletomorrow.org. And so I'll be following that. I'll be following the zoning stuff as it comes to a close. Something and also what happens after, right? Like, just because the zoning code gets passed, that's not the end. There's the anti-displacement measures the city's been talking about. There's programs, because you can't just all these other things have to go into it too, like subsidy. You can making sure people can afford to fix their homes so they can stay in their homes, all of that. So I will be following up on all of that in the coming weeks and months, because as we know, city government stuff can take a while. So just keep an eye on cvilletomorrow.org for more, housing and neighborhood stuff. The next Changing Charlottesville should be out in January. And if anyone has questions, I can always try my best to answer them. You can email me. I'm pretty easy to find online. So just reach out and I'll do my best to answer with the information I have. So
all right, thank you.
And thanks as always, like everyone who I've ever talked to for a story. Ms. Dorenda and I have talked for a few, and her opinion, her perspective is so valuable. So I'm just always grateful to the folks throughout the city and the county who share those stories with me, so that we can share them with our readers. So
yes, indeed. Thank you both for your time, and please reach out however we can continue to help and work together to make it better for our community.
Same.
And thank you guys for all that you do as well.
Appreciate you. Really appreciate that. All right, you guys enjoy your Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.